The city was no longer a place of life. Broken towers leaned against each other like tired giants. Smoke filled the air, turning the sky into a heavy blanket of gray. Fires burned in the distance, and the ground trembled under the roars of beasts. Set free during the invasion, Lyra ran through the ruins, her heart pounding harder than ever before. Her small hands clutched the torn cloth of her dress, and blood trickled from a cut above her brow. Her kind had once ruled this place, but now they were prey. She stumbled over a fallen beam, gasping for air, but she forced herself to keep going. The beasts were behind her. She could hear them. Huge, heavy steps, sharp claws scraping broken stone. Their growls made the air itself seem colder. She turned into a narrow alley, slipping between two broken walls. Her breath came in short, painful bursts. Her legs burned. Her whole body screamed for her to stop. But she couldn't. If she stopped, she would die. Lyra found a crumbled building ahead, half swallowed by the ground. She ducked inside, her bare feet slipping on the dust-covered floor. Inside it was dark and cold. The air smelled of old stone and wet earth. She crouched low, hiding behind a pile of broken furniture, trying not to make a sound. The beasts' growls grew louder. She could hear them sniffing, hunting. Tears welled up in her eyes. She wiped them away with trembling fingers. She had lost everything: her family, her home, her future. She had no strength left. No hope left. Lyra knew she was trapped. The beasts would find her soon. She closed her eyes tightly, pressing her forehead against the cold ground. She thought of her mother's voice, singing to her when she was a child. She thought of the clear skies before the war. "If this is the end," she whispered to herself, "then let it be quick." The sound of footsteps stopped just outside. Heavy breathing filled the entrance. The ground shook as the beast drew closer. She squeezed her eyes shut even tighter, waiting for the sharp pain of claws. But instead of the expected roar, there was a sudden sharp sound. Bang! It echoed through the broken walls like thunder. Then another. Bang! Lyra's eyes snapped open. The heavy breathing had stopped. There was a loud thud as if something huge had fallen to the ground. She dared to lift her head slightly. Standing in the entrance, surrounded by dust and smoke, was a human. He wore battered armor, and his face was covered with dirt and old scars. In his hands he held a weapon, something Lyra had only seen in the forbidden images of human warriors. For a moment, she froze. Fear gripped her chest. Humans were dangerous. Humans were enemies. That's what she had always been told. The man's sharp eyes scanned the darkness and landed on her. For a heartbeat, they stared at each other, alien and human, both shaped by a world gone mad. Then the human moved. He slung the weapon over his shoulder and stepped carefully toward her, his hands raised slightly to show he meant no harm. Lyra's instincts screamed at her to run, but her body was too weak. She shrank back, pressing herself against the broken wall. "It's okay," the human said softly. His voice was rough but calm. "I'm not going to hurt you." She didn't understand all the words, but his tone was gentle. Different. Not what she expected, from a human. Without warning, another growl shook the air. Another beast, drawn by the noise, was charging toward the building. The human's head snapped toward the sound. Without thinking twice, he rushed to Lyra, scooping her into his arms. She gasped in shock but couldn't fight him. He was strong, far stronger than she was. Carrying her like she weighed nothing, the human sprinted through the back of the building, weaving through broken walls and rubble. The beast crashed into the place they had just left, roaring in anger. The human didn't slow down. He ducked into a narrow tunnel half hidden behind collapsed stone. The darkness swallowed them whole, but he moved confidently, as if he knew every inch of the ruins. Finally, after what felt like forever, he stopped in a small underground chamber. There was a broken light on the wall, flickering weakly. Dust floated in the stale air. The human set Lyra down carefully. She stumbled but managed to stay on her feet. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Lyra clutched her injured arm, staring at him with wide, uncertain eyes. She didn't know what to think. Was he her savior, or just another kind of danger? The human reached into his belt pouch and pulled out a small metal bottle. He offered it to her. "Water," he said simply. Lyra hesitated, then took it with shaking hands. She drank deeply, the cool liquid burning down her dry throat. The human watched her, silent. In that cold, broken place among the ashes of a ruined world, something small but powerful began to grow between them. Trust. The underground chamber was silent except for the soft flickering of the broken light. Dust floated lazily in the air, and the ground felt cold under Lyra's bare feet. She sat against the wall, clutching the water bottle the human had given her, her fingers still trembling. Across from her, the human worked quietly. He removed a small device from his belt, a scanner, and swept it around the entrance of the tunnel, checking for any signs of movement. Satisfied that they were safe for the moment, he finally turned back to her. Lyra studied him carefully. His armor was battered, scratched from too many battles. His dark hair was messy, and there was a tiredness in his eyes that spoke of long struggles. Yet he moved with purpose, every action careful and steady. He crouched down near her, keeping a respectful distance so she wouldn't feel threatened. From a pouch on his side, he pulled out a small kit. Inside were bandages, a tiny bottle of antiseptic, and some strange tools. Lyra tensed when he opened the kit, unsure what he planned to do. The human noticed her fear and spoke softly. "You're hurt. I can help, if you let me." She understood. Only part of the words, but his tone was clear, kind, careful, not demanding, not harsh. Slowly, Lyra nodded. The human moved closer. He cleaned the wound on her forehead first. The antiseptic stung and she winced, but he murmured something under his breath. Words she didn't understand, but somehow they made her feel calmer. When he finished wrapping her head, he gave her a small smile. It was a tired, crooked smile, but it was real. Lyra blinked, surprised. She had not seen a real smile since before the invasion. He offered her a piece of dry ration food from his bag. She hesitated, then accepted it with a whisper of thanks. The food was hard and tasteless, but it filled the hollow ache in her stomach. After she ate, they sat in silence. Lyra looked down at her hands, dirty and scraped. She had so many questions but didn't know how to ask them. Why had he saved her? Why wasn't he like the others she had heard about? Finally, the human spoke again. "Name's Carter," he said, tapping his chest gently. She frowned in confusion. "Carter," he repeated slowly. Lyra pointed to herself. "Lyra," she whispered. He nodded, understanding. For the first time, she saw that maybe not all humans were enemies. Maybe some were different. A loud roar echoed faintly from above, making them both tense. Carter quickly grabbed his scanner and checked the readings. His face grew serious. He looked at Lyra and spoke quickly, pointing to the tunnel behind them. "We have to move. Not safe here." She didn't understand every word, but she caught the meaning. Danger was coming. She nodded. Carter helped her stand. Her legs were weak, but she managed to stay upright with his support. Together they moved, deeper into the tunnels. The ground was uneven, and the darkness seemed to press against them from all sides. As they walked, Carter kept his weapon ready, moving in front to shield her from anything that might appear. Lyra stayed close behind him, her trust growing with every step. The tunnel opened into a wider space, a service room once used for the city's underground trains. It was abandoned now, filled with broken machines and old crates. In one corner, Carter found a pile of dusty blankets and some tools left behind by survivors who had passed through before. "This will do for now," Carter said, mostly to himself. Lyra watched as he quickly set up a small camp. He built a tiny fire using bits of dry wood, careful not to let the smoke rise too high. The fire gave off a little warmth, and Lyra felt her body relax a little for the first time in days. They sat by the fire, sharing the silence. Carter pulled out a small notebook and began to sketch something. Lyra leaned over to see. It was a rough map, a drawing of the tunnels and streets above. He was planning their next move. She admired his focus. He wasn't panicking, even though the world around them was falling apart. His calmness gave her strength, too. After a while, Carter looked up and pointed to a place on the map. Here, he said. Safe zone. Maybe. Lyra understood the word safe. She nodded eagerly. The journey would not be easy. Between them and the safe zone were more beasts, invader patrols, and broken ruins. But for the first time since everything fell apart, Lyra felt a small spark of hope. Maybe with Carter's help she could survive. As the fire crackled quietly, she wrapped the old blanket around her shoulders. Carter leaned against the wall, keeping his weapon close, but his eyes were softer now. In this dark, broken world, two strangers, alien and human, had found something rare. Trust. Lyra closed her eyes, not from fear this time, but from exhaustion, knowing that for tonight at least, she was safe. Tomorrow, the real journey would begin. The first light of morning never reached the underground tunnels. Instead, a dull gray glow filtered down through cracks and broken vents. It was enough to wake Lyra. She opened her eyes slowly, feeling the stiffness in her body. Her muscles ached, but there was something comforting about the warmth of the old blanket and the steady crackle of the small fire. Carter was already awake. He sat nearby, checking his weapon and packing his supplies. His movements were silent and careful. Lyra watched him for a moment. There was a seriousness about him, but also a patience she had not seen in many humans, or even among her own people. When Carter noticed her awake, he gave a small nod. "We leave soon," he said. Lyra nodded back, pulling the blanket tighter around herself. She understood enough to know what he meant. Danger was still close. They could not stay here for long. Carter offered her a piece of ration food. She took it gratefully, chewing slowly as she thought about what lay ahead. She knew little about this human, but so far he had shown her nothing but kindness. It confused her. It scared her a little too. Was it real? Could she trust him? Once they finished eating, Carter packed the last of their supplies. He motioned for her to stay close, and together they left the small camp, moving deeper into the tunnels. The journey was slow. The tunnels twisted and turned like a maze, some parts flooded, others blocked by fallen debris. Carter led the way, clearing paths and helping Lyra over obstacles. Sometimes he whispered warnings, signaling her to stay low when strange sounds echoed through the dark passages. Hours passed in this silent, tense march. At one point they heard voices, human voices. But Carter quickly pulled Lyra into a side tunnel and pressed a finger to his lips. They waited in complete silence as a group of rough-looking humans passed by, carrying weapons and supplies. Lyra noticed Carter's hard expression. Not all humans could be trusted, she realized. Some were just as dangerous as the beasts above. When the group moved on, Carter and Lyra continued their journey. Later, they found a small room where broken crates and old tools had been left behind. Carter paused here to let Lyra rest. She sat on a crate, breathing heavily while he searched through the junk for anything useful. From an old locker, Carter pulled out a strange metal object. After some tinkering, he smiled and showed it to Lyra. It was a small light device. He pressed a button and a soft, steady beam of light shone from it. Lyra's eyes widened. It was simple, but in the dark tunnels it felt like magic. She smiled at him, her first real smile since the world had fallen apart. Carter smiled back, a quick, shy thing, then clipped the light to his belt. They would move faster now, with better sight. As they prepared to leave the room, a soft cry echoed through the tunnels. Both Carter and Lyra froze. The cry came again, weak, desperate. It was the sound of someone calling for help. Carter looked at Lyra. She shook her head quickly, fear in her eyes. It could be a trap. It could be another beast imitating a voice, as some of the smarter ones had learned to do. But Carter's jaw tightened. His hand moved to his weapon, and without another word he moved toward the sound. Lyra hesitated only a second before following him. They found the source of the cries in a small maintenance room, a young boy no more than 10 years old, huddled in the corner. His clothes were torn, his face dirty and tear-streaked. When he saw Carter and Lyra, he flinched, trying to hide. Carter knelt down slowly, speaking in a low, gentle voice. "It's okay, we're not going to hurt you." The boy stared at them for a long moment, then slowly crawled out of his corner. Lyra's heart ached. She could see herself in him, lost, scared, alone. Carter offered the boy a drink of water, and the boy grabbed it with shaking hands. After drinking, he whispered, They took my family." Carter's face darkened, but he said nothing. He just put a hand gently on the boy's shoulder. They couldn't leave him here. Without hesitation, Carter lifted the boy into his arms. He turned to Lyra and nodded toward the tunnel ahead. Their small group had grown by one more lost soul. As they continued their journey, Lyra felt a strange feeling grow inside her. Watching Carter carry the boy, protecting him just as he had protected her, she realized something important. This human was not acting out of duty. He was not acting for reward. He simply chose to protect those who could not protect themselves. In a world that had forgotten mercy, Carter remembered. For the first time, Lyra felt not just hope but determination. She would stay with him. She would fight beside him, and she would believe that maybe, just maybe, there was still good left in the universe. Their fragile alliance was no longer just about survival. It was about something far greater: trust, courage, and a bond that could change everything. The tunnels grew colder and darker as Carter, Lyra, and the young boy moved deeper underground. Their footsteps echoed softly against the stone walls. Every sound around them felt louder in the silence: the drip of water, the distant rumble of collapsing buildings above, and sometimes the low growl of beasts far away. Carter led the way with the small light clipped to his belt. His eyes stayed sharp, watching every corner, every shadow. Lyra carried the boy's hand tightly in hers. Though her body ached and her legs felt heavy, she would not let go. The boy was counting on them now, just as she had counted on Carter. They moved quietly, avoiding open spaces and large rooms where sound could travel too far. Carter's map, sketched roughly on old paper, guided them. He had marked a safe zone. On it, a place he believed survivors might have gathered. But it would be a long journey to get there. Hours passed. Their stomachs growled with hunger, but they had little food left. Carter gave the last bit of his ration to the boy, who tried to refuse but finally accepted with grateful eyes. Lyra watched Carter's face. He didn't show his tiredness, but she could see it. His shoulders were tense, his movements slower than before. They needed rest. But the tunnels were not safe. As they walked, they found others too. Small groups of survivors hidden in the cracks of the city. Some were human, some were alien like Lyra, and many were too weak to fight. Carter helped where he could, giving water, pointing them toward safer paths. Most were too scared to follow, choosing instead to hide and hope. One evening, as they neared an old maintenance station, Carter stopped suddenly and raised his hand. Lyra froze, pulling the boy close. Ahead, faint torchlight flickered. Voices murmured, angry and rough. Carter moved silently forward, peeking around the corner. A group of armed men, humans, stood there. Their faces were hard and their laughter was cruel. They wore pieces of different uniforms, mixed and torn, and some had alien weapons slung across their backs. Raiders. They were not like Carter. They were survivors who had chosen to steal and hurt others to stay alive. Lyra felt fear grip her again. Carter stepped back quietly. He signaled to Lyra and the boy to move back the way they came. They tiptoed through another side tunnel, avoiding the raiders. For hours they moved through the darkness, careful to stay hidden. Finally, they found an old subway station half buried in debris. It smelled of dust and rust, but it was empty, and safer than the tunnels filled with raiders. They collapsed near an old platform. Carter set up a small fire again, hidden behind broken machines to block the light from showing outside. As the fire warmed the space, Lyra helped the boy lie down to rest. He curled up in a blanket Carter had found earlier, falling asleep quickly. His small face looked peaceful for the first time. Lyra sat beside Carter, both of them staring into the fire. "You tired?" Carter asked, his voice low. Lyra nodded slowly. She was exhausted. But more than that, she was worried. "Raiders," she whispered, remembering their cruel faces. Carter sighed. "Yeah, they're getting desperate. This city's running out of food. People get ugly when they're scared." He tossed a piece of broken wood into the fire, watching the sparks dance. Lyra hugged her knees, thinking. She had always believed humans were monsters, but now she realized it wasn't about humans or aliens. Fear made monsters out of anyone. After a while, Carter spoke again. "Not all bad," he said, glancing at her. "Some people still try to do the right thing." Lyra met his gaze and nodded. She believed him. She pointed at herself, then at him, and the boy. "Family," she said softly. Carter smiled a little. "Yeah," he said. "Family." It was a simple word, but it carried a heavy meaning. In a world full of danger and betrayal, they had found something rare, a bond that could not easily be broken. Later that night, while the boy slept, Carter and Lyra took turns keeping watch. Carter showed her how to use a small knife he had found, how to hold it, how to defend herself if needed. "You're stronger than you think," he told her quietly. His words gave her courage. When her turn to watch ended, Lyra lay down beside the boy and closed her eyes. She listened to Carter's slow breathing and the soft crackle of the hidden fire. Even with so much darkness around them, she felt a little safer. Tomorrow, they would face more dangers. They would have to cross ruined streets, fight off beasts, and avoid raiders. The safe zone was still far away. But for tonight, in this forgotten corner of the broken world, they had something no one could steal from them. Hope. The next morning came without sunlight. Only the distant rumble of crumbling buildings told them it was a new day. Carter woke first, stretching his sore muscles before carefully waking Lyra and the boy. They moved quickly, packing their few supplies. The boy clung to Lyra's hand as they followed Carter deeper into the tunnels. The old subway paths twisted and branched, and danger seemed to breathe from every dark corner. After an hour of walking, they heard soft footsteps ahead. Carter raised his hand, signaling them to stop. He crept forward, weapon ready, and found another group of survivors. 3 of them, 2 men and 1 woman, huddled near a broken vending machine sharing scraps of food. The survivors jumped when they saw Carter but relaxed when they saw Lyra and the boy behind him. None of them looked dangerous, just tired, hungry, and desperate. "We're heading to the safe zone," Carter said calmly. "You can come if you want, but you follow my lead." The woman, who looked the strongest among them, nodded. "We'll follow." With more people, the group moved slowly. Lyra stayed close to Carter, her trust in him unshaken. The boy clutched her side, eyes wide with fear. Hours passed as they moved through the tunnels, crawling over fallen beams and sneaking past places where the beasts roamed, but something felt wrong. Lyra noticed it first. One of the new men, a thin one with a crooked smile, kept whispering with the other man when they thought Carter wasn't looking. Their eyes flicked toward Carter's weapon more than once. Their steps were too slow, as if trying to delay the group. Carter noticed too. He tightened his grip on his weapon, his body staying alert. Later that day, when they reached an old maintenance hatch leading to the surface, the trap was sprung. As Carter climbed out first to check the path, the thin man pulled a hidden blade and lunged at him. Carter dodged just in time, knocking the attacker aside. The woman survivor, who had seemed trustworthy, also turned, pulling out a crude weapon. Betrayal. They hadn't joined to survive. They had planned to take Carter's supplies, his weapon, and maybe more. Lyra screamed, pulling the boy behind a broken crate. Carter fought hard, Though tired and outnumbered, his training showed. He knocked one attacker to the ground with a punch and kicked the other backward. The woman slashed at him, cutting his arm, but Carter grabbed her wrist and twisted it until she dropped the weapon. Breathing hard, Carter stood over them, his weapon ready. "You picked the wrong man to cross," he growled. The attackers, beaten and afraid, fled into the tunnels without looking back. Lyra rushed to Carter's side. His arm bled from a deep cut, and his face was pale. She tore a strip from her own clothes and quickly wrapped the wound, her hands shaking. "You okay?" she whispered. Carter gave a weak smile. "I've had worse." The boy hugged Carter's leg tightly, refusing to let go. They couldn't stay there. More danger would come soon. Carter led them out of the hatch and onto the broken streets of the city. The surface was worse than the tunnels. Buildings lay in shattered heaps. The sky above was a sick color, filled with smoke and dust. Fires burned in the distance, and the cries of beasts echoed across the ruins. Carter found a fallen highway that stretched across the city like a broken bridge. It would give them a path toward the safe zone, but it was risky, open, and exposed. Still, they had no choice. They climbed onto the broken road, moving carefully across cracked pavement and abandoned vehicles. Carter moved slower now, his injured arm weakening him. Lyra walked beside him, helping when she could. The boy clung to her other hand. They moved in silence, every step filled with fear. Halfway across the highway, a pack of beasts spotted them from the streets below. Their roars shook the ground. They began to climb the shattered buildings, racing toward the road. Carter looked back. His face was grim. "Run!" he shouted. They ran as fast as they could. The boy stumbled, and Lyra scooped him into her arms, pushing her body to go faster. The beasts were getting closer, huge monstrous creatures with sharp teeth and deadly claws. Carter stopped suddenly and turned to face them, raising his weapon. "I'll hold them," he shouted at Lyra. "Get to the end." "No," Lyra cried, shaking her head wildly. But Carter gave her a hard look. "You have to. Protect him." Tears burned in Lyra's eyes, but she obeyed. Carrying the boy, she ran faster, heart breaking with every step. Behind her, she heard the sound of gunfire and the beast's furious roars. She didn't stop. She couldn't. Finally, she reached the end of the broken highway, where a large concrete wall surrounded a ruined district. Beyond it, if the map was right, was the safe zone. She collapsed behind a broken pillar, gasping for air, holding the boy tightly. Trembling, she turned to look back. Carter was still fighting, still standing, still protecting them. Lyra wiped her tears fiercely. "I won't leave him," she whispered. "Not now, not ever." The journey wasn't over yet, and she would fight too. Lyra sat against the cold concrete wall, trying to steady her breath. The boy was asleep in her arms, his small body curled up tightly. She didn't know how long they had been running, but the exhaustion had settled deep into her bones. Still, she couldn't allow herself to relax completely. The sound of the beast's roars still echoed in her ears, and she knew that danger was never far behind. She looked back at the highway, where Carter had fought. The road was empty now, save for the smoldering remains of the vehicles and the broken buildings that loomed overhead like fallen giants. She had no idea if Carter had made it out. She wanted to believe he had, but doubt gnawed at her heart. She squeezed her eyes shut, pushing away the fear. Carter had promised to protect them. He had always kept his word. She had to trust that he would survive. The boy stirred in her arms, his small hands clutching her sleeve. She glanced down, brushing a lock of hair from his face. His innocence was a stark contrast to the harsh world around them. How had it all come to this? How had everything fallen apart so quickly? Her thoughts were interrupted by a faint sound, footsteps. At first she thought it might be another beast or a group of raiders, but then she saw him, Carter. He was walking toward her, his arm still bleeding, his steps slow and labored. His face was bruised and scratched, but he was alive. And that was all that mattered. Lyra stood up, rushing toward him, the boy still in her arms. "Carter," she cried, relief flooding her chest. He looked at her and smiled faintly. Told you I'd be fine, he said, though his voice was raspy. She didn't care about his words. She just wanted to hold him to make sure he was really here. She rushed to him, pulling him into a tight embrace. His body was warm, but he was still so injured. She could feel the pain in his muscles, in his breath. Don't scare me like that, she whispered, tears filling her eyes again. He chuckled weakly. I didn't plan on it, he said, his voice tired but comforting. But we've made it this far. We're not giving up now. Lyra looked at him, her heart swelling with admiration. He had fought so hard to protect them. It was more than she had ever expected from a human. He was a stranger, but in this broken world, he had become everything to her. And now, they had to keep moving. The safe zone was still far away. Carter looked at the boy in Lyra's arms. How is he? He asked softly. Lyra nodded. He's okay. He's tired, just like us. Carter scanned their surroundings, making sure the beasts hadn't followed them. They had no time to rest. He knew it. She knew it. We need to keep going, he said, his voice firm but gentle. The safe zone is close, but we can't stop now. Lyra nodded, her resolve hardening. We'll get there, together. They moved forward, walking as quickly as their tired bodies would allow. The boy stirred again, but this time he didn't cry. He was strong, just like the two of them, and they were doing this for him. They made their way through the remains of the city, keeping to the shadows and avoiding open spaces. The silence felt suffocating, and every sound felt like a warning. They had been walking for what seemed like hours when Carter stopped abruptly. Lyra looked at him, concerned. What is it? She asked. He held up a hand, signaling for her to be quiet. His eyes were narrowed, scanning the area around them. She didn't hear anything at first, but then it came. Soft footsteps, too light to be a beast. Human. Raiders. Carter muttered. They're close. Lyra's heart raced. There was no way they could outrun them. The raiders were faster, better equipped, and more willing to do whatever it took to survive. If they were caught, there would be no chance of escape. Carter motioned for her to stay close and pulled out his weapon, checking it one last time. Lyra glanced around, looking for cover. The crumbling buildings provided little protection, but it would have to do. They pressed themselves against the side of a building, trying to remain hidden. The sound of the raiders grew louder, and Lyra felt her pulse quicken. She had to stay calm. They had to stay calm. The raiders appeared from around the corner, a group of 4. They were armed with makeshift weapons, bats, knives, and scraps of metal. Their eyes flicked toward the building they were hiding behind, sensing something was wrong. Carter didn't wait. He stepped out from behind the wall, firing a warning shot into the air. Stay back, he shouted, his voice firm. The raiders hesitated for a moment, their eyes narrowing. You have nothing we want, one of them said. Move along and we'll let you go. Carter's expression hardened. I don't think you understand, he said coldly. We're not here to fight. We're just trying to survive. But the raiders weren't interested in negotiations. One of them raised his weapon, preparing to strike. That was the moment Carter moved. In a blur of motion, he disarmed the attacker, knocking him to the ground with a well-placed kick. The others rushed toward him, but Lyra acted quickly. She grabbed a broken pipe from the ground and swung it at one of the raiders, catching him off guard. For a moment, there was chaos. The sound of fighting echoed in the empty street as Carter and Lyra fought side by side. The boy huddled behind them, too terrified to move. In the end, the raiders were forced to retreat, nursing their wounds. Carter and Lyra stood, panting but unharmed. Their eyes met, a brief moment of silent understanding passing between them. We can't stay here, Carter said, his voice serious. We need to move now. Lyra nodded, her heart still racing. Let's go. They didn't look back. They couldn't afford to. The safe zone was still ahead, and they would fight whatever came their way to reach it. The sun was low in the sky as they reached the edge of the broken city. The road ahead was open, and for the first time in days, they could see the vast stretch of land leading toward the safe zone. The walls that once marked the city's boundaries now lay in ruins, but beyond them was a small group of buildings, still standing, though weathered and scarred. It was a far cry from the towering cities of the past, but it was their hope. Lyra walked beside Carter, the boy still clutching her hand tightly. The weight of their journey was on her shoulders, but the closer they got to the safe zone, the lighter it felt. She had fought so hard to survive, but it was not just about surviving anymore. It was about building something new, for herself, for Carter, and for the boy. As they neared the gates of the safe zone, the faint sounds of life reached their ears. Voices, the quiet hum of machines, and the soft clink of metal. These sounds, so ordinary, felt like a symphony to Lyra. They were not alone anymore. But even as the promise of safety drew near, caution lingered. Carter stopped at the entrance, his gaze scanning the area. He motioned for Lyra and the boy to stay close while he checked the perimeter. "We don't know who's inside yet," Carter said softly, his voice barely above a whisper. "Stay sharp." Lyra nodded. The boy's grip on her hand tightened, sensing the tension in the air. He looked up at her with wide eyes, but she gave him a reassuring smile, even though she was just as nervous as he was. Carter returned after a few minutes, his expression thoughtful but calm. "Looks like it's safe for now," he said, though his eyes still carried a wariness that Lyra understood well. "Stay behind me." They walked through the gates cautiously, entering the safe zone. The area was much smaller than Lyra had imagined, but it was enough. The walls, made of salvaged metal and concrete, provided some protection. People moved around, repairing buildings, gathering food, and talking in quiet groups. It was a glimpse of life, a glimpse of hope. Lyra followed Carter, her eyes wide as she took in her surroundings. There were people here, humans and aliens alike, all doing their best to rebuild. Some looked at them with curiosity, others with caution. But no one came forward to greet them, and that suited Carter just fine. He knew better than to trust easily. They found a small, empty building near the center of the safe zone. Carter led them inside and set down their few belongings. Lyra placed the boy on a makeshift bed of blankets in the corner, her hands still trembling from the journey. "We can rest here for the night," Carter said, his voice quiet but reassuring. "Tomorrow we'll figure out what to do next." Lyra nodded, though her thoughts were already racing. What now? They had made it this far, but the future was uncertain. They were safe, but only for now. She had seen too much destruction, too many lives broken to believe that things would just magically get better. It would take more than just surviving. It would take hard work, trust, and rebuilding. She sat down beside the boy, her eyes scanning the room. Carter sat across from her, his expression unreadable. She wanted to ask him what he was thinking, to ask him how they would move forward, but she didn't have the words. She didn't know what the right question was. The boy stirred in her arms, and she gently rocked him back to sleep. Carter watched them both for a moment before standing up. "I'll check outside," he said. "Make sure no one's planning to attack." Lyra didn't argue. Carter was always thinking ahead, always watching for danger. It was one of the things she admired most about him. She had never known someone who cared so deeply for the safety of others, someone who would sacrifice so much for the chance to protect. When Carter left, Lyra stayed by the boy's side, her thoughts drifting. They had come so far. She had thought that they might not make it, that she might never see a place like this again. But now, they were here. The road ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time, Lyra felt something she hadn't felt in a long time: hope. Later that evening, Carter returned with news. "The people here are willing to help," he said. "They've been struggling too, but they've got food, shelter, and some supplies. We can stay here for a while, get back on our feet." Lyra's heart lifted. "So, we're safe?" "For now," Carter replied. "But we need to stay alert. We don't know how long this peace will last." Lyra nodded. She knew better than to get too comfortable. But for tonight she would allow herself to rest, to believe in something better. As they sat together in the small building, the boy asleep between them, Lyra looked at Carter. "Thank you," she said softly. "I don't know what I would have done without you." Carter gave her a tired smile. "You don't need to thank me. We're in this together." And for the first time since everything had changed, Lyra believed him. They had survived together, and now, maybe, they could rebuild together, too. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, but for tonight they were safe. Tomorrow they would face the future, together.